Welcome to Destination History, where we take you to the world's most epic, breathtaking, and notorious places. No passport required. In this episode, we travel to two places where the edges of empires met the unknown. One, a windswept outpost at the tip of Newfoundland, where Norse explorers touched the shores of North America centuries before Columbus. The other, a stone barrier slicing across the rugged landscape of northern England, the Roman Empire's northernmost frontier, built to keep out the untamed wilds beyond. Some stories are written in stone, others in silence. This is Destination History. Today we're traveling to the eastern end of North America, specifically Newfoundland, Canada, because who wouldn't take a long flight in order to prove their history teacher wrong? Welcome to Meadows National Historic Site, the place that proves the Vikings were doing their thing in North America way before Columbus ever showed up. Yeah, that's right. The original explorers of the New World were rocking helmets and longships, not powdered wigs and questionable navigation skills. And spoiler alert, they didn't come here for the beaches. So how did the Vikings get here first? Well, they didn't exactly have GPS, so picture this. It's the 11th century. You're a Viking explorer sailing across the freezing North Atlantic, dodging icebergs like they're landmines, hoping to stumble upon something interesting. And sure enough, they landed here. It may not be five-star luxury, but for a Viking, this was prime real estate. That's because 1,000 years ago, instead of grassy fields, this place was packed with forests, perfect for repairing boats, building houses, and smelting iron. The Vikings called it Vinland, the land of wine, probably because of the wild grapes and the surprisingly mild climate. Or maybe because Frostbite Bay doesn't have quite the same ring. Once they landed, the Vikings set up camp with his longhouses. It wasn't exactly luxury living, but hey, it worked. These homes were built from wood and sod, had a low, sturdy profile, and were perfectly camouflaged in the meadows. They were warm, durable, and most importantly, ready to withstand whatever this unforgiving coastline threw at them. Plus, they have that whole eco-friendly vibe going on long before it was cool. It's impossible to nail down the exact population at any time, but experts suggest the longhouses could have supported anywhere from 30 to 160 people. It's also believed the site was occupied for maybe 20 years, suggesting it wasn't a permanent settlement, more like a temporary spot for boat repairs. So how do we know the Vikings set up shop here? Back in the 1960s, archaeologists uncovered the remains of 8 Viking structures, including longhouses, workshops, and storage buildings. Plus, they found these little artifacts. They're basically Viking breadcrumbs. A bronze cloak pin here, an iron nail there. Definitely not things that grew on trees. These everyday items confirm that, yep, the Vikings were here, making their mark on the North American continent centuries before any other European. So why didn't they stick around? Well, let's just say after experiencing the harsh environment, tough winters, and dwindling resources, suddenly Vinland didn't seem so promising anymore. The Vikings were tough, but this land was even tougher. Today, Meadows is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a must-see for anyone who wants to stand at the very spot where Vikings first set foot in North America, before Columbus and before the Pilgrims. It's one of the greatest what-could-have-been stories in history. Imagine, if things had gone differently, maybe we'd all be speaking Old Norse right now. So the next time someone tries to tell you that Columbus discovered America, drop a little knowledge. The Vikings were here first. Meadows is proof that before there were conquistadors, there were longships, iron tools, and Norse explorers, ready to conquer whatever came next. The Norsemen weren't the only ones to carve out a new life at the edge of the world. Across across the Atlantic, in the rugged, windswept hills of northern England, the Romans built their line in the sand, or rather, in stone. Welcome to Hadrian's Wall, or as I like to call it, the Roman Empire's giant Do Not Enter sign. Spanning 73 miles across northern England, this wall is, technically, Britain's OG border fence. Built almost 2,000 years ago, it's ancient by today's standards, yet somehow it's still in better shape than that IKEA table I bought last month. The Romans first swaggered into Britain in the year 43, eager to show off their engineering skills and bring order to the locals. They would eventually stick around for almost 400 years, but some 8 decades into their reign, they'd learned enough about the place to put up their imposing Do Not Disturb sign. Stretching from the River Tyne near Newcastle in the east to the Solway Firth on the west coast, Hadrian's Wall wasn't just a random line across the land. It was built to separate the Roman civilized world from the so-called barbarians to the north, in what is now Scotland. That's right, Hadrian, the emperor who ordered this thing built, and the Roman legions who conquered literally everything and everyone, thought the Scots were too much to handle. While its length was certainly impressive, its height not so much. At its prime, Hadrian's Wall was only about 15 feet tall. I mean, that's hardly enough to deter even a mildly enthusiastic Scotsman. But that didn't matter to the Romans, who built it to mark the official edge of their empire. Beyond the wall, they could just pretend that whatever lay out there didn't concern them. That's what my therapist would call a classic avoidance strategy. As you could probably guess, this was no weekend project. It took 3 Roman legions, around 15,000 citizen soldiers, for at least 6 years to finish. Along with a massive wall, the Romans built small guardhouses every mile or so. These were manned by anywhere from 10 to 30 soldiers, who day after day stared out into the mist, hoping they wouldn't see Mel Gibson and a bunch of blue-painted Scots charging their way. But let's be real, the locals were more into grazing sheep than starting wars. So more often than not, guarding the walls involved staring out into the distance and wondering just what the emperor was thinking by sending them all the way out here. Some 10,000 men in total were assigned to guard the length of Hadrian's Wall. To garrison them all, the Romans built a string of 15 large forts. One of the best preserved is Housesteads, located in Northumberland County. It stands today as a veritable time capsule that somehow still clings to this rugged hillside after nearly 2,000 years. Called Ferco Vicion by the Romans, this place had it all: barracks, headquarters, a temple, even a hospital, all in support of an 800-strong infantry regiment. One of the most impressive sets of remains left standing is the granary. Here you can see the remains of stone floors sitting perched atop stone pillars. These work to keep the vast amounts of grain dry and the rats out. These storerooms once held vast amounts of grain, essentially keeping the garrison fed and semi-happy as they shivered through their northern deployment. Ah, the latrines, the pinnacle of Roman engineering meets necessity. Sure, the Romans built aqueducts and temples, but let's not overlook the ancient communal restroom. Imagine stone benches with holes strategically cut out, lined up so that soldiers could get brief while sitting side by side, marry a privacy while in sight. Talk about team building. And yes, there was running water, because even the most hardened legionnaire needed a civilized flush. Modern plumbing? Not quite, but it did keep things moving, if you know what I mean. And let's not forget that Housesteads boast some of the most unbeatable views in England. That's because the fort sits strategically positioned on a hill, giving the Romans a sweeping view over the rugged, unpredictable land to the north. Sure, it's beautiful, but it also served as a great lookout in case any trouble was coming their way. A short distance down the wall, Chester's Fort stands out as one of the most complete Roman cavalry forts in Britain. not to mention a great example of 2nd century luxury accommodations. Built during Emperor Hadrian's big "let's build a giant wall" phase, this fort, called Salernum back in the day, was a cushy spot for Roman cavalry troops who patrolled the empire's northern edge, while probably dreaming of a nice Mediterranean villa. The centerpiece of Chester's fort is its Principia, or headquarters, which is still standing, well, mostly lying around in neat stone rows. Here, the Roman commanders would have strutted around like big shots, overseeing soldiers and storing the good stuff, aka the payroll and weapons, in the strong room. You can wander through these foundations and picture all the pomp, though you might find it hard to feel too impressed when it's now just a series of crumbling walls with a view. One of the coolest spots is the bathhouse. This is where the soldiers came to scrub off the mud, sweat, and general existential dread of life at the end of the empire. The communal baths included a cold plunge and hot baths heated by a fire built under the stone floors. There was even a changing room that rivaled the one in my high school gym. Imagine the Romans blissfully soaking away their cares while ignoring the chilly English winters, because what's a little frostbite when you've got lukewarm bathwater and dreams of Rome? As for the barracks, well, luxury accommodations they were not. What you can see today are the long, narrow rectangles where soldiers bunked in what can only be called the original studio apartments. Each room housed up to 30 Roman soldiers, making them cramped, drafty, and very, very basic. Picture dozens of weary, mud-caked men, all griping about the British weather. It's a wonder anyone got any sleep at all. All things considered, Chester's fort may seem a bit lacking these days, but it had serious staying power, proving that Roman grit and maybe a little stubbornness can outlast just about anything. So what did Hadrian's Wall accomplish? Well, besides giving British school children a fun field trip, it didn't exactly keep out the northern tribes. Over the next few hundred years, they crossed it, negotiated through it, ignored it, the usual rebellious stuff. The wall did, however, leave a lasting legacy, proving once and for all that sometimes the best way to make peace is just to build a big wall and hope for the best. So next time someone tells you about the Roman Empire's might, remember Hadrian's Wall, a humbling reminder that even the most powerful empires sometimes just stop. And when they do, they lay behind a bunch of stones for us to puzzle over. Good job, Hadrian. Your legacy, a very large do not enter sign. Empires rise and fall, but their echoes remain in the soil, in the stone, and in the sand. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, this is Destination History.